done soon. It simply isn't that hard. You just look into the eyes of a domestic violence victim, you look into the eyes of the children, and you know it isn't that hard. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Arizona.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to make a very brief comment, primarily for the benefit of our Republican colleagues who have been inquiring about whether or not we would have and when we would have a vote to invoke cloture to proceed to the cybersecurity legislation. I'm hopeful that we can do that very soon. From my perspective, it would be wise for us to move forward, to go to the bill and see if we can work things out. There have been discussions between various groups who are interested in the subject. They are now all talking to each other, which is a very good sign, because it's amazing how when senators get together and talk to each other, sometimes we can actually accomplish things in a bipartisan way. So my hope is that we can do that. If it turns out it doesn't work out, we can always vote no at the end of the day. But I believe that we should go forward, that we should get on the bill, and therefore I intend to support cloture on the motion to proceed to the cybersecurity legislation. I thank my colleagues for yielding.
Madam President. Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I appreciate the courtesies of my colleague from Maryland, and I promise I'm going to be just no more than 10 minutes. 2 years ago, members of both parties in this chamber recognized that America's economic recovery was fragile, too fragile to absorb a tax increase. Since then, obviously my colleagues across the aisle have changed their minds and experienced a change of heart. Yesterday, the Senate voted to raise taxes. I've been amused by some of the headlines that I've read that says that the Senate voted to cut taxes, which is false. The Senate didn't vote to cut taxes. The Senate voted to maintain the tax rates that have been in existence for 12 years for a certain class of taxpayers, while raising taxes on everyone else. I can't explain the logic behind this vote. I can only assume that it is some election year calculus designed to galvanize the political base of our friends across the aisle. It most definitely is not good economics, and it is not good for job creation. For 3 years, it's no secret, America has been living through the weakest economic recovery since the Great Depression. We know from history, from economics, and from common sense that the last thing you want to do amid a persistently slow economic growth is to dramatically raise taxes on income investment. If you want more economic activity, if you want growth, you don't burden it further. You relieve those burdens, which allow it to flourish and grow, which creates prosperity and jobs. And yet our friends across the aisle just voted to raise taxes on nearly 1 million American businesses. Many American businesses don't operate as a corporation. They operate as a sole proprietorship, partnership, in other words, mom and pop operation, or even as a subchapter S or some other legal entity which causes business income to be paid on individual tax returns, not on a separate corporate tax return. The bottom line is when you raise taxes on people in the top tax brackets, you inevitably are going to capture, in this instance, 1 million different individuals paying business income on an individual tax return, which is bad for the economy, bad for jobs. We should make no mistake about it. Given our anemic growth rates, given the ongoing debt crisis in Europe, and given the economic slowdown in China and other emerging market countries, raising taxes on so many job creators could easily tip the U.S. economy back into recession. You know, if you take yesterday's vote to increase taxes on so many small businesses, together with the unwillingness to deal with the single largest tax increase in American history, which will occur on December the 31st, 2012, in something that's been called Tax-Mageddon, when all of the other tax provisions, virtually all the tax provisions in the code, will expire, the ones passed 12 years ago. You combine that huge tax increase with the sequestration, $1.2 trillion, which comes disproportionately out of defense spending, and without exception, the economists I've talked to say we will be in a recession. Why is it that our colleagues across the aisle are willing to risk putting America back into recession just to raise taxes? I can't understand that unless they've taken some kind of poll, done some sort of focus group that have laid out some strategy which is not readily apparent to most people. So the idea this tax increase would solve our fiscal problem is laughable. As my good friend, the Republican leader, said yesterday, the additional revenue generated by the taxes that our Democratic friends voted for yesterday wouldn't fund the government for a week. A week. And that's before we consider the harmful impact on the economy and jobs. Whenever I talk to business owners back home in Texas, they express utter bewilderment as to why members of Congress would want to raise taxes during the current economic environment. Don't our friends across the aisle realize how many small businesses are struggling to stay afloat? Don't they realize that our Byzantine tax code and misguided regulations are already strangling job creation? Don't they realize that our national unemployment rate has been stuck at more than 8% for 41 consecutive months? No one here wants to see another recession, but apparently some are willing to risk a recession by putting ideology ahead of sound economic policy. After last night's vote, I thought of all the Texas entrepreneurs, more than 400 of them who've contacted my office, sending their personal, inspiring American success stories. These stories remind us that the American dream is still alive, and it's inextricably intertwined with our free enterprise system. It's not a gift from government. It's what people earn as a result of hard work and the opportunities given to them in this great country. These stories remind us the American dream isn't dependent upon government assistance. It's not about taxing certain people to pay for ideologically driven government projects like Solyndra. It's about offering all Americans the opportunity to earn their success and achieve their dreams. My office has received literally hundreds of entrepreneurial success stories from Texas, stories like that of Gary Murray, a Vietnam veteran who came home from the war after 3 tours as a Marine in Vietnam, who spent 2 decades working at IBM, and then launched his own fencing club. Fencing club. For more than a quarter century, Gary's Round Rock Fencing Club has been training young Texans and producing world-class talent, including 2 Olympians and 1 world champion and 8 national champions. It's a remarkable story about someone deciding this is what they want to do, this is where their passion lies, making the most of it, creating opportunities for other people. Gary started the Round Rock Fencing Club with his own money, without any financial support from the government. What he achieved on his own. His story is a testament to hard work and human creativity. As Gary puts it, the only support I got was from my wife and from my family. There are many other business owners like Gary Murray all across Texas and all across this great country. Before my colleagues advocate higher taxes on these businesses, perhaps they should spend some time talking to the job creators and small business people and the entrepreneurs about the myriad challenges and obstacles that government places in their way because of high taxes and overregulation. I suspect my colleagues might learn something. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent to Hala First, a Presidential Management Fellow on Detail to the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, be granted the privileges of the floor during the duration of the debate of S. 3414.
Without objection.
Madam President, I have taken the floor before to talk about the health care reform bill, to comment on the Supreme Court decision, which I believe history will show was clearly the right decision. It was the right decision on the law, giving the Congress the power to legislate in an area where there is a national need, as the legislature did in the 1930s with Social Security, in the 1960s with Medicare. The health reform proposals that were adopted by Congress was within the purview of the legislative branch of government, and the Supreme Court upheld that right in that decision. I also said it was the right decision because it allows us to move forward on a path towards universal coverage where all Americans are guaranteed access to affordable health care. America will now join all the other industrial nations of the world to say health care is a right, not a privilege. The legislation that was passed, the health reform bill, has already helped American families. Let me just talk about one area. I could talk about many. But what it has done in protecting our consumers against the practices, the arbitrary practices of health insurance companies. We already see that is in effect where families are being able to take advantage of the fact that there's no longer any lifetime caps on health insurance policies. And by 2014, we will eliminate annual caps on benefits on the health insurance plans. We already have seen for our children the elimination of pre-existing conditions, so our children can get policies without having restrictions on what is covered and what is not covered. By 2014, we will see that the pre-existing conditions for everyone will no longer be an obstacle to full insurance coverage. That's particularly important for women, where we know at times they've been held to be a pre-existing condition because of a pregnancy or being the victim of domestic violence. We have seen discrimination in premiums against women. That no longer will be the case. And I could talk about many Marylanders who are happy today because they can keep on their parents' insurance policies the fact that they've aged past 21. They can now stay on that policy to age 26. But, Mr. President, I want to talk about one other aspect of this law that may not be quite as familiar to our constituents. And this provision will take effect on August the 1st, but we already are seeing the benefits. And what I'm talking about is the 80-20 rule, where health insurance companies must give value for the premium dollar to the beneficiary. At least 80% of the dollars we pay for premiums must go for benefits. Let me share with you a letter that I received from one of my constituents. She wrote, "I recently had a pleasant surprise. 2 checks from my health care insurer that were rebates on premiums paid. I am someone who has to buy individual health coverage and have been doing so for the last 8 years. The premiums are high and the deductible is high. So I am essentially paying a high price for catastrophic coverage while still paying for individual doctor visits, prescriptions, etc. It is frustrating, but the choices are limited and expensive for individual coverage. And you don't really know how good your coverage is because you don't use it unless you have to make a major medical event. My premiums go up every year despite the fact that I don't make claims. This month, I received a check in the amount of $139 from my current insurer and over $300 from a previous insurer. Both checks were rebates as a result of the new Health Care Act. I didn't realize it, but the Act requires insurance companies to use 80% of the premiums they collect on health care costs, and neither of them hit that percentage and were thus required to provide a refund. Wonderful. The bill is so complicated that I do not understand a great deal of it, but I am pleased with this aspect, which seems to go a long way in helping keep health care costs reasonable and prevent consumers from being gouged. So thanks to the Senator and all who helped with this Health Care Act. Mr. President, I bring this to my colleagues' attention because there's going to be millions of Americans who are going to be getting rebate checks. And some are going to start scratching their heads, not wondering where it's coming from. They're going to be saying, gee, I guess made a mistake in the premiums I paid. They're returning them. They're getting those checks because of the passage of the health reform bill. And the provision in the health reform bill that requires insurance companies to give value for the premium dollars that we pay. That protection is now in the law of the land. And thanks to the acts of Congress and President Obama and the Supreme Court upholding the law, those rebates are going to be received. For the number of people in the country, it's 12.8 million Americans who are going to get rebate checks worth about $1.1 billion. Average rebate, $151. That's real money for people who are struggling with their health care needs. I'm proud in the state of Maryland there's going to be $27 million made available to 141,000 Marylanders with an average rebate of $340 for those who get rebates in my state. Let me break this down a little bit further. In the individual market, like the person I received the letter from, the rebates for the people in Maryland actually will be average a higher amount. They'll average $496. I think that speaks to the fact that insurance companies have hedged their bet in the individual market. They tell us that, you know, we got to charge a lot more because we don't know what we're getting. When in reality, they're making a lot more money on the individual market. So for the people of Maryland, 38,000 of them are going to get on average close to $500 in rebates, thanks to the passage of the Affordable Care Act, thanks to the passage of health reform, and thanks for the Supreme Court upholding our right to do it. The same thing is true in the small group markets, where we find that there will be 3.3 million Americans will get rebate checks that are in the small group markets. These are the markets, of course, in which, again, the options were not as great, more difficult, because of insurance carriers not as anxious to insure people in small group markets as they are in the larger markets. The average rebate per family will be $174. In Maryland, that number, again, is higher, $310 for the 13,000. And, Mr. President, it also applies to those that are in the large group markets. These are the large plans. They also are going to see rebates because the insurance carriers charged excessive fees, and they're going to get premium dollar rebates. 5.3 million Americans that are in these large plans will see rebates that average $135. In my own state of Maryland, there will be 89,000 with rebates averaging almost, well, $268 per family. These are one-year numbers. These continue every year. So let me tell the people of Maryland, let me tell the people of the country what you can expect. You might get a check. It'll be delivered to you at mail. It'll be a rebate check. That's as a result of the passage of the health reform bill. You might also see a deposit into the account that automatically pays for your health premiums, because the insurance carrier can make a direct deposit into the accounts in which are paying for these premiums. Or it's possible you might find a reduction of future premiums. They can use it to reduce your future premiums, but they have to let you know that. So you realize you're getting the rebates, but it's being applied against future premiums. Or if the employer is paying the premiums, the rebates will go to the employer, but the employer must use it to benefit your plan. They can't use it for themselves. It's used to help, again, the beneficiaries. And you'll get notice of that. My purpose, again, is to make it clear that you would not have gotten these rebates but for the protections that are in the Affordable Care Act. I know my colleague from Vermont and I have been on the floor many times pointing out that all Americans, not just those who don't have insurance today, not just those who might have been discriminated against because of pre-existing conditions, not only that 24-year-old that's now on her parents' policy, but all Americans benefit from the Affordable Care Act, the protections that are in there. And now millions who thought they were being treated fairly by their insurance companies are going to be able to get rebates because of excessive premiums. The rule works in combination with another provision of the law that requires rate review to ensure premium increases are reasonable. In other words, we put into the law protections against unreasonable increases in your premiums. Insurance companies are now required to justify any premium increases of 10% or higher. Most states now have the authority to determine whether these increases are excessive, while HHS review rates in states that do not operate under effective rate review programs. That's how federalism should work. States have an opportunity to act. They don't have adequate review. We have national backup and protection to make sure the rate reviews are being handled in the appropriate way. So, Mr. President, as our constituents start to get the benefits, another benefit of the health reform bill, and there are many, many more that are starting to take effect, and we'll hear about some more of those next week on August the 1st. I just wanted my constituents in Maryland and my friends around the nation to know that we have provided that you get value for the premium dollar you pay for your health insurance. And we back that up with enforcement so that if there's excessive premiums being charged, the insurance carriers must rebate those premiums to you. Millions of Americans will get the benefits starting now, and we're pleased that this type of protection is in the Affordable Care Act. And with that, Mr. President, I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President, I would ask suspension of the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to take a few moments just to update folks about what's happening as it relates to the very important effort to pass a 5-year farm bill for our country, for our ranchers, for our farmers, for those who care deeply about nutrition and conservation policy for the country. We have over 16 million people, somewhere between 16 and 20 million people that work in this country because of agriculture, the Farm Bill, food policy, and we came together, and I'm very proud of all the work that we did together to pass a bipartisan Farm Bill. And in doing that, we sent a very strong message on a number of fronts, that we were committed to certainty for our growers, economic certainty, that we understand, that we understand the need to have long-term policies in place. And we also sent a message about disaster assistance. There's no question, I've spoken on the floor before, as my colleagues have, that we have a very serious situation happening all across our country related to livestock, a broad question now of drought in every region of the country. We've also had areas, in addition to drought in Michigan and other places, where fruit growers have been hit with an early warming and then freeze again. So we've had multiple reasons to care about short-term disaster assistance, and I'm very proud that the bill that we passed includes a very, very good livestock disaster assistance program that we made sure was available for this year and will be very helpful for our livestock producers. We also added provisions for fruit growers that will help those that don't have access to any crop insurance. That will include this year. And we looked to the future by putting in new options on crop insurance, new tools for the Risk Management Agency to be able to develop with growers, with commodity groups across the country, crop insurance, so in the future, as we see these kinds of weather disasters, that they will have more certainty, because there will be better coverage, broader kinds of coverage for crop insurance for all commodities, which we don't have today. So we need to pass a farm bill. We need the House to pass a farm bill, both for long-term policy but also for disaster assistance right now. We also know that this is an opportunity to have deficit reduction. The only bipartisan effort we have had on deficit reduction on the Senate floor, and I would argue probably on the House floor as well, bipartisan effort, has been through the Farm Bill. $23 billion in deficit reduction, major reforms, changing policy, eliminating 4 different subsidies that are there when growers don't need them, or for things that they don't plant anymore, and replacing it with a risk-based, market-based system so that we really are there when farmers need us, like they do right now. So there's a whole range of things that we've done. Reforms and strengthening conservation efforts in our country, focusing on the right policies around nutrition, around local food systems, and so on. All of that is in jeopardy, Mr. President, at the moment, because the House, rather than bringing to the floor the bill passed out of the House committee, and I should say, even though it's different, I would argue it doesn't have all of the reforms that we have, it takes a little different approach on commodities and so on. It's a bill we can work with to come to final agreement on between the House and the Senate, but instead of bringing that to the floor, getting it done, we're now hearing discussions about just passing some kind of a disaster assistance program, which certainly we need to do, and we already passed it, and we can strengthen it, certainly, as we move forward to a conference committee. I would support doing that as well. But instead of having a full 5-year Farm Bill policy, they're talking about kicking the can down the road one more time. Seems to be a very popular strategy around here, not one the public wants us to use, but extending a Farm Bill for another year, no deficit reduction, no reform, no certainty for farmers, and policies that would be extended for another year that don't work for a lot of industries, and then just do some disaster assistance. I think that that would be a disaster, Mr. President. And so I strongly urge colleagues, I know that we have colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I'm grateful to the leadership of the chairman and ranking member in the House for their advocacy and leadership. I know there are people that want to get this done, but we need to know that the House leadership will allow that to happen. So in fact, we can get real reform, deficit reduction, and the kinds of policies we need in place that will really solve problems and provide the safety net that all of our farmers need. Now, if we end up in a situation of just an extension, what happens? Well, as our presiding officer, our distinguished presiding officer knows, it would keep in place a dairy policy for another year that didn't work. 2009, I remember sitting around a table when we were looking at what was happening to dairy farmers, folks who were going out of business, losing the farm because of policies that didn't work. And the House is talking about extending those policies for another year, rather than doing the changes and the reform that we put in place that would help dairy farmers all across the country. They're talking about an extension that would eliminate about half the support for fruit and vegetable growers that we put in place in the last Farm Bill. I was proud to author that. We've strengthened that in this Farm Bill. It's one of the largest areas of commodities, groups of commodities in the country, and that would not be continued. There are a number of things that, frankly, would not be continued or available, and there are a number of things that would continue that are bad policy. So if we have a one-year extension, we're continuing something that we rejected here, and everybody on both sides of the aisle, and the House and Senate, said they don't want to do, which is direct payments which go to farmers, government payments, regardless of whether prices are high, prices are low, good times, bad times. They continue even on things you don't grow anymore. We all said that makes no sense. We all said instead we want to move to a risk-based system and have a strong safety net and be there when farmers and ranchers need us, strengthen crop insurance, make sure that farmers have skin in the game, they're sharing in that cost on crop insurance. But that doesn't happen with a simple one-year extension. We continue things that we've all said are not good policy, cost taxpayer money. We shouldn't be spending at a time of huge deficits. We should not have those kinds of subsidies in place. We eliminated 4 of those. $15 billion in savings alone in the commodity title. And all of that would go away under what the House is talking about. We would be continuing things that people have said were bad policy. Everyone talks about reforms and changes, but this would continue the old ways. We eliminated about 100 different programs, duplication, they don't work anymore, redundancy, whatever it is, about 100 different programs we eliminated in what we passed. They would all continue, every single one of them, for another year if we just do a one-year extension. So, Mr. President, let me just say in conclusion that I encourage House colleagues to join with us. We can have differences in what a commodity title looks like, and I respect those differences, and we can work those out if we have the opportunity to negotiate in good faith and get things done. We will do that. We can have differences in what should happen in the nutrition title, but we should not be saying to farmers and growers that we're going to walk away from them and put in place another kick the can down the road strategy that keeps bad policy or no policy going, no deficit reduction, and puts us in a situation where, frankly, a year from now, it's tougher, it's a bigger mess than ever, and our growers are looking around, trying to go to the bank or trying to figure out what they're going to do when planting season comes and make decisions, and they're looking at us going, what happened here? Why did you do this? We did our job in the Senate in a strong bipartisan basis. It was a lot of hard work. We spent a lot of time here. We need to complete the job. And if our House colleagues will come together with us, if the Speaker, the leadership in the House will decide to give us a vehicle through which to do that, I am very confident we can get the job done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, for the information of my colleagues, I know that the Senate leader is in discussions with the Republican leader, and I know the hope is that we can soon have the vote on the motion to proceed to S-3414, but as yet I have not been informed that there has been the necessary meeting of minds. So I hope it'll be soon, and I hope everyone will support it. With that, I would yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka?
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
Senator from North Dakota.
I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to introduce the Domestic Energy and Jobs Act. It's a comprehensive plan for energy security for our nation. When I say energy security, I mean producing more energy than we consume. And I believe with this approach, within 5 to 7 years, we truly can be a nation that is energy secure. Again, meaning we produce more energy than we consume. It is a comprehensive plan for energy security. It is about truly producing all of our energy resources in this country. It's a package of energy bills. Many of these bills have already been passed by the House that we're introducing now in the Senate, as well as additional legislation, ideas that senators have put forward that we're adding to it as well. Really, the approach is similar to the approach we have taken in North Dakota over the last decade. My home state of North Dakota has developed all of its energy resources, both traditional and renewable, in a vigorous way over the last decade. And we're now really an energy powerhouse for the nation. You've seen what we're doing in oil and gas, but really we're doing a tremendous amount in all other forms of energy as well. Again, both traditional and renewable. And it's because we worked in a very inclusive way to include everybody's ideas in building a comprehensive energy plan that we call Empower ND, Empower North Dakota. And there was no one person that sat and kind of came up with this whole comprehensive plan or with all the ideas, but we reached out to everyone, all of the different energy sectors, and said, hey, let's collaborate, let's work together, let's pass a comprehensive energy plan, and then let's keep improving it. Let's make it a process rather than a one-time product, and keep adding ideas and bringing forward things that will help us spur and drive our energy development in the state, things that will create the kind of business climate that will truly empower private investment that will deploy the new technologies that not only produce more energy, but do it with sound environmental stewardship. And that's exactly what's happening in North Dakota. That's exactly what we need to do at the national level. And this Domestic Energy and Jobs Act clearly demonstrates that we have an energy plan and that we're ready to go, and that we're coordinating with our colleagues in the House as well. Right now there are 30 sponsors for this legislation, including the Republican leadership as well as the energy leaders. It also is a plan that we've reached out to what the House calls their HEAT team, which stands for House Energy Action Team. Representative McCarthy and others, certainly Fred Upton, who is head of their Energy and Commerce Committee, Representative Hastings, and others who are truly energy leaders in the House, people that I've worked with on things like the Keystone Pipeline, Representative Terry and Representative Connie Mack, and others. So this is about getting people involved in an inclusive way and putting in place an energy policy that truly serves this nation and empowers private investment. And you see how important that is now. We have hundreds of billions of dollars, investment dollars, that is just waiting to be invested, producing more energy, more jobs, more security for our country. This approach will empower private investment to develop all of our energy resources. It does things like reduce the regulatory burden, streamlines permitting both onshore and offshore, helps us develop vital infrastructure like the Keystone Pipeline. It develops our resources on public lands, including our renewables, and setting realistic goals with a market-based approach, not picking winners or losers, and preserving multiple use on our public lands throughout this country. It would put a freeze and require study of rules that are driving up our gasoline prices. It also includes a bill from Senator Murkowski that directs the U.S. Geological Survey to establish an inventory of critical minerals in the United States and to set policies to help us develop those minerals. So what is the impact? Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in March of 2011 undertook a study. In that study, they looked and determined that there are more than 350 energy projects that are being held up because of inability to get permitted or regulatory burden or other hurdles and roadblocks. In that study, they determined that if these energy projects, again, more than 350 energy projects could be green-lighted, it would generate $1.1 trillion in additional gross domestic product and 1.9 million jobs a year. 1.9 million jobs a year just in the construction phase for those energy projects. So this legislation isn't just about energy for our country. It is about energy. It is about a comprehensive approach, more than 13 different pieces of legislation, many of which have already passed the House. It is about a comprehensive approach to get development of our energy resources underway in a big, big way, but it is about job creation. It is about economic growth. It is about economic growth that will help us get the 13 million plus people who are currently unemployed back to work. It is about economic growth that will help us generate revenue to reduce our deficit and our debt, and it truly is about national security. Look what's going on right now in the Middle East. Look what's going on in Syria, in Iran, in Egypt with the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. Look at the instability, yet we still depend on oil from the Middle East and places like Venezuela. There's no need for that. We can produce our own energy here and more. It's an interconnected world. We all know that. So when I talk about energy security, I mean producing more energy than we consume. That's what I mean by energy security. And of course, as you increase supply, what happens? It helps bring prices down. Think of the impact that has for our families and for our economy. Just recently, in the last few days, a company called CNOOC out of China, which is essentially a Chinese government-owned company, offered $15 billion to buy Nexen, a major Canadian oil company. $15 billion. Why did they do that? To buy energy resources in Canada, so that China would own energy resources in Canada. As you know, I've been down here on the floor many times, and I've worked very hard to get the Keystone Pipeline approved. Because if we don't produce and get that oil from Canada, somebody else will. And China is working to do just that. So after the administration held up the Keystone XL pipeline, what happened? Canadian Prime Minister Harper went to China. There he met with Chairman Hu and the other leaders and the energy leaders in China, and they signed an MOU, or MOA, Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Agreement. And in it, what they said China and Canada are going to cooperate on developing resources, energy resources in Canada, and of course that energy then goes to China. So the question you have to ask, are we going to work with our closest friend and ally, Canada, to develop things like the Keystone XL pipeline so oil will come from Canada to the United States rather than going to China? Or are we in this country going to be in a position where we have to buy our oil back from the Chinese? I know how the Americans want that question answered. And that's what I'm talking about. We need to be developing these energy resources in this country and together with our closest friend and ally, Canada, and we can do it. And there's another important point to be made here. I know that there are some opponents of developing the Canadian oil sands, concerned about CO2 emissions, but here's some things that they have to think about. Already you can see China coming in, working with Canada to develop those resources. So those resources are going to be developed. The question is that oil going to China or is it going to come to the United States? And the point is this: by building pipelines, we not only bring it to the United States, but we empower investment in the Canadian oil sands that will help us produce more energy, but do it with better environmental stewardship. 80% of the new development in the Canadian oil sands is what's called in situ, which means drilling instead of the excavation. That means lower CO2 emissions. That means emissions much more in line, very much in line with what we produce now in the United States with our conventional drilling. So we have an opportunity. We have an incredible opportunity. We need to seize it with both hands. And as I say, we can be energy secure in this country within 5 years. And I think when people look at what's going on in the Middle East, when they see our soldiers over there, when they see the instability that's being created by regimes like Syria or Iran, when they see what's going on in countries like Egypt, and they understand that there could be an event that closes the Strait of Hormuz. They understand what that would mean for oil prices and energy prices in this country. We do not want to be dependent on that situation, which means it's time to act. This is not about spending money. This is about generating jobs and generating revenue that will help us reduce our deficit, that will put our people to work, that will unleash the private investment, the entrepreneurship, the ingenuity of the American people to truly propel our nation forward, to propel our economy forward, to make us safer and more secure. The time has come to act. The House passed much of this plan with bipartisan support. We need to do the same in the Senate. And this isn't the end of the story. This is an important part, the foundation, if you will, of building the right energy story for our country. And we can do it. And I urge my colleagues to join me in this effort. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor. I also note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Akaka.
Thank you. Madam President,
The senator from Vermont.
I would ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President.